Thank you so much, Kavya, for joining us today. Hey guys, welcome to today's video. So today I'm going to do something hatke different. So we are starting off with this series called Career Conversations, where we'll be inviting people who are accomplished working professionals who are working in your target companies or who are alums of your target schools like ISB, INSEAD, people who are working with Bain, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, people from product management, marketing, general management as well. But with for today's session, which is session one, we have Miss Kavya. I'll let her introduce herself, but the intent of today's conversation is to understand what ISB looks for and what all you should keep in mind in terms of your GMAT or GRE prep, as well as your essays and the application. But just to get us started, Kavya, can you help us with your pre-ISB background, where you worked, when you applied, which year, and your educational qualifications also?
So I did my BCom from Xavier's and I was doing my CFA as well. Post college, through campus placement itself, I joined EY as an analyst. So that's a little bit about like my background. In terms of when I applied to ISB, I was in the batch 421, the COVID batch. And at ISB, I also focused on strategy and finance as my majors.
Okay, understood. And why did you decide to apply for ISB? I mean, a lot of people, when they're applying for B schools, they try to apply for B schools abroad. So did you apply for any other B schools? And where did ISB fit into the picture with respect to your aspirations?
So I think I was kind of like the early entrance program to ISB. I kind of knew while I was at college itself, second or third year, when you kind of decide whether you want to go for an MBA or if you want to go for a master's straight away, or if you want to kind of, work for a couple of years before you go for any kind of master's. So I think I took that call that I wanted to kind of work for a few years to understand different industries and where I wanted to be before I do my master's and kind of, take like a different, if I want to change my career path, I had that option, or if I want to continue in the career that I had chosen, which was consulting, then, to probably get into a better firm or to switch to like a strategy consulting. So kind of decided to go into my job and then look at my master's. And in terms of when I started looking at my master's, right, like what I wanted from my master's was a great like guidance applying to ISB. The reason I chose ISB, there were obviously two options. One is whether you want to work in India or you want to work abroad. I think for me, it was very well clear that, like I didn't want to settle abroad. I wanted to settle in India. I wanted to like stay in India. So I think that kind of, cut off at least some of the global schools for me, because the return of investment is just doesn't make sense unless you want to work there for a couple of years. So that kind of took out, the global schools. When I looked at the Indian schools, I had two options. One was like obviously all the prestigious IIMs, but they were really 2-year programs, right? And by this time I was I wanted to work as well, right? So I worked for 2.5 years. I didn't want to kind of spend 2 years in an MBA. So ISB's 1-year program did give me like that flexibility to finish my master's and get back into like that was like one of the most generic answers to why you would hear ISB over like other Indian schools, but that was definitely one of the driving factors. But the second thing is, I think I kind of like when you look at your profile, which I found different from a lot of other Indian colleges, whether it's undergrad or postgrad, is that you don't just look at your academic profile. For me, that was very important because that kind of shows the kind of cohort you will get to interact with. It's not just one kind of a profile. It's you look at very like holistic. Like we had someone from different backgrounds of the professional world, of like academic excellence or of athletic excellence. So I didn't want that diversity. I did like the fact that they looked at the holistic profile of the individual. So I think for me, those were the two factors. And lastly, which was also very important, I think ISB is known for like consulting aspects, right? I was already into EY and I really liked consulting at that point of time, and I wanted to go into like big things. So I was like, ISB also makes sense that.
Awesome, understood. And how much time did you spend on your essays and how did you write them?
Got it. I think I actually spent a lot of time on my essays. typically I saw a lot of people applying with me, and like otherwise there are two kinds of people. One who spend a lot of time on their essays, and the second people who started like a day before it's due, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was definitely the former, and I would recommend that as well because I think, like I mentioned, at ISB looks for a very holistic profile. So I think it's very important for you to represent who you are, why you want to do this course, what you want to get out of that course. I think ISB actually looks at your profile and sees whether it makes sense for you to even come to ISB, right? Like if it's not something that would actually benefit you to reach your career goals or any other kind of professional goals, they wouldn't want to take you in. So I think it's very important for you to reflect even at that point of time, and it helped me also reflect, why am I going to ISB? So I did a couple of iterations as to how I went. I thought it obviously just started out on my own, reached out to as many alums as I could, because I think as alums you kind of understand what ISB is looking for, and also like if people from different walks of life also like look at your profile, you know who's going to be reviewing it, whether it's going to be a finance person, a marketing person, an entrepreneur. So to ensure that kind of relates to like a larger audience, good to get like multiple reviews done. Like I think I've gone almost like 5 people to look at my essay or something.
Yeah, understood. So is it fair to say that a serious aspirant should spend at least 6, 7 weeks, if not more, on their essays?
Yeah, I would say 4 to 6 weeks is good
Hmm.
time.
Okay.
But I would also like it depends when you're taking a GMAT, right? Because usually
Yeah.
in 3 months, aspirants kind of want to do everything in 3 months.
Yeah.
So I paced it out. I did it honestly in 8 weeks, where I was also studying for my GMAT, and like whenever I got a little bit more time over the weekends, I would work on my GMAT and my essay.
Okay.
So more than the time, it depends on like how many iterations you went through and
Understood.
how many.
So you did a GMAT prep in parallel alongside your job and your essays, all these three things. I think that's the best way to go about it, because a lot of people, what they do is I'll write my GMAT first, and whatever time I have left, I'll give it on my essays. And a lot of times you don't end up getting that score, then you end up deferring your applications, and then you don't end up applying at all in that year.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's a very good advice, because a lot of people don't do this. Even when I was applying, I did my essays as well as my GMAT prep in parallel.
Hmm.
So that's a very good insight. And did you write the GMAT or the GRE, and are you comfortable in sharing your score? I'm assuming it's good. And also, how did you prepare for the exam?
Sure. So I wrote my GMAT. I got 710. It's probably like kind of like the average, I think, at ISB.
Hmm.
So how I went about it? I think with GMAT, I think the main thing is you want to see what kind of a score you want to get, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of set that target for myself. I wasn't look so yeah, I think I set that score in mind. I wasn't looking at a 750 because I had multiple things at that point, right? I was working in consulting,
Yeah.
I was running my essay. At that point in time, I was also taking my CFA. So
Okay.
it was like a multiple bunch of things that happened together. So I kind of made myself that I'm looking at ISB and I'm focusing on ISB. So I know that like a 710 with my profile would be a decent score for me to kind of get through. So one is I think that getting your expectations right, right? Like if you want to get a 710, you don't have to study as much as or like study as many topics if you want to get like a 750 plus. So I
Yeah.
think one is setting like that target for yourself, which I don't see a lot of people doing, right? They're like, I want to study as hard as I can and I want to get like the most amount of score, which is fair if you have like a lot of time. But if
Yeah.
you're constrained for time and if you're doing multiple things at once, I think just setting like that expectation for yourself as to what you want to get, that's really
Hmm.
important. I think the second most important factor is taking mocks.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I think when I was preparing for it, and a lot of people around me, we all felt very anxious to take mocks, right? So like we want to prepare as much as we can before we take our first mock, or after we get a bad score in our first mock, like we'll study everything and all the sections and
Yeah.
score like a great score in our second mock. That's not going to happen to most people. That's not going to happen, right? So it's
Yeah.
okay to get like it's okay to get a bad score in your first few mocks, but don't stop giving those mocks
Hmm.
because that's really important for you. One is you understand the exam and the way the exam works. Right? It's all algorithm based. So you understand what to expect as your second question. You also kind of learn, and for me, this was an important factor to solve the problem in a time bound area. Right? Like, unlike other exams, you had to do like 2 minutes for a question. So
Yeah.
sometimes that is also like a learning, which doesn't come if you're practicing on your own as such, right?
Yeah.
So think for me, the second most important thing was the number of mocks that I gave.
Okay. And I think you gave a very good insight, always set a target score in mind. But how did you arrive at 710? Did you get your profile evaluated from alums who gave you this advice? How did you go about that target score setting mechanism?
So honestly, I was looking at anything between 700 to 740. That was the range that I was targeting.
Okay.
The reason being is that I did speak to a lot of alums before I even applied. And I didn't really have my profile judged, but when I spoke to them, I understood their background, one, and I understood what kind of a score they got. So
Yeah.
I spoke to alums who got 690, right? And
Okay.
I read their essays. And I saw their profile. So I saw that kind of a profile getting in. I also saw people who got 740 and get it. So I was like, okay, I don't want to risk it putting it at 690. I'm okay with
Yeah.
the 700 and 740. And not only ISB, but like even if you look at other global schools, their MIM program, 700 to 740 is what they say is like a good school to get you. 740 plus is like much smoother. But again, I was like, let me try with this. And I also applied in round one. So I was like, worst case situation, I can give my GMAT again and apply again. So I think that's how, yeah. And speaking to alums in a similar profile, right? Like similar colleges, similar educational backgrounds, similar professional background, that shows you what kind of schools with what kind of profiles get you in. So that's how I kind of got at the 700.
Understood. And how was ISB like? How was that 1 year rigorous curriculum? And you can be honest about it.
So I think I was in the COVID batch, right? So
Yeah.
obviously my experience would be very different. I had much lesser distractions, I would say, at least before we all reached campus, right? So I think we reached campus in our second term or third term. So till then, it was really easy to concentrate on academics. And before I got into ISB, I knew, okay, I want to get into the big three. From whoever I spoke to the big three, they were like, CPG is like the most important aspect of your entire resume, right? So I kind of knew that I had to focus on academics. And again, I think pre-setting that goal before I went to ISB that, yeah, I want to focus on academics is one of my priorities. Help me keep that focus, when you go to campus, I think that is when, you have multiple, like we had case comms, you have a lot of clubs that you want to be a part of, and, various other social activities, etc. If you're speaking strictly in terms of how ISB was for me, in terms of how I would use ISB as like a stepping stone to get to, another consulting firm, I think concentrating on academics, I did an ELP at ISB as well, which was like a consulting based ELP. So that also helped me strengthen my resume. Yeah, and I think another important factor is that showing consistency in the hobbies that I had. So I would play basketball throughout and continue to play basketball even at ISB. So in terms of even like my extracurricular activities, I was still not just focusing on like academics, but focusing on the full range of things that ISB had to offer.
Understood. So basically, you did two things. You focused a lot on academics, and then you did a life project, that to a consulting centric life project. And ELP, for our reference, it's a life project. A company visits ISB, pays ISB a small fee. Then they collaborate with a group of 2, 3 students. And it's like a remote internship. The students stay on campus, but they solve that client's, that company's business problem for 4 to 6 weeks. But anything else? Were you a president or a vice president or a coordinator in a club?
Yeah, so I was a part of the solstice coordination. That's what I plan to do. Also, very systematically placed post, like the resume submission and post placement. So I realized that I want to focus my time on academics before the resumes went out, and then I joined solstice. So again, it's like a choice you had to make. I wasn't too you don't have to there's a misconception again that you have to do 10, right? And do 10 things brilliantly. I would say instead of doing 10 things in an average way, pick 2 or 3 things and do it in a really good way and do it above average. So I always focused on picking those 2 or 3 things that I wanted to do. Like I played in the ISL team as well. So 2, 3 things that mean to you and 2, 3 things that you actually have an interest in versus just doing it because everyone's doing it, or doing it because you have FOMO or thinking that I don't have enough to show in my resume. That's not true. Do 2 or 3 things and be the best at that.
Understood. And how many consulting shortlists did you get?
I think I got almost every except McKinsey.
Wow. You got all the consulting shortlists, at least from the
Every,
tier one.
yeah. So everything
Wow.
that I applied to that year, I think there was Accenture, there was the other consulting firms basically because I did also come from a consulting background.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think that helped for sure.
Understood. And last question before we conclude is how has life after ISB looked like professionally? Has there genuinely been a transformation, and what are you doing right now?
So I think life after ISB has obviously changed, right? Like I mean, in terms of like there are two aspects, right? Like professional and personal. So I think in a professional setting, it definitely helps you. Like like for me, it was my dream job. Like I always wanted to work at a big three, so it
Yeah,
got me there. Right? And if you ask me professionally, of course, I'm very happy. The hours are definitely long. And I was well aware of like the art that I was choosing, right? Again, coming from that background. So for me, it was not that much of a drastic change. So I think definitely ISB helped in that. And then in terms of personally, like the peer group that you have, right? Again, ISB has such a diverse base of candidates. So the peer group that you have in a new city, so I was from Calcutta, I moved to Bombay. And if it wasn't for ISB, I wouldn't know, I would barely know anyone in the city, right? And
yeah.
I think ISB helps you meet like-minded people.
Okay.
And especially when you're moving to a new city, I think it's important for you to like be surrounded by people who you can like lean back on. So I think definitely that peer group is given by ISB. And yeah, and I think even confidence
Mm.
when I got to speak because of all the sessions that we had and we had the subject section elective as well, right? So I think those definitely boost like your soft skills and your confidence in general. So yeah,
Understood.
I think those are things that really help.
And any advice, any parting advice to a prospective ISB applicant with respect to what to keep in mind before they start off with their application process?
I think for me, it's like definitely just assessing where you are and setting very realistic goals.
Hmm.
Don't try to do everything. Like
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of pressure because a lot of people feel that their profile is not good enough to get them somewhere.
Yeah,
We've all been there, right? Like you're not confident about yourself, and that's why you pick up a bunch of things. Or
yeah,
sometimes you're so overwhelmed that you don't even apply, right? Like you let the round go, and you're like, you know what? Like I'm not ready. I'm not ready for my GMAT. Let me push a def for my GMAT. You don't do it. You can give your GMAT thrice. If your first one doesn't go well, but
yeah.
try and see how much. So I think just that, like not being like if you are not confident enough, don't feel like there are 100 people like that, and it's not a make it or break it, right? Like the good part about ISB is that there are two rounds. It's GMAT, it's not CAT that happens only once a year, so you have a lot of more chances. So it's
Yeah,
just that you have to take that one step and start preparing yourself.
understood. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kavya, for this. I'm pretty sure the conversation will help a lot of ISB applicants. And thank you so much on everybody's behalf.
Thank you so much.